My name is Caleb. I'm 30 years old, and 3 years ago, I walked into a boardroom and legally evicted my own parents from the house I grew up in. They called me ungrateful. They called me heartless. But they forgot that they were the ones who taught me that business is business. Before I tell you about the look on my brother's face when he saw the foreclosure notice, drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. I want to know who's riding with me on this one. It started on a Tuesday, a rainy, miserable Tuesday in November. I was working as a junior data analyst at a mid-sized logistics firm. It wasn't a glamorous job. My salary was barely enough to cover my share of the bills and the student loans I was drowning in, but I showed up every day. I kept my head down. I did the work. I pulled into the driveway of my parents' house around 6:30 p.m. The rain was coming down in sheets, the kind of cold rain that soaks through your jacket in seconds. I hit the button for the garage door opener. Nothing happened. I hit it again. Still nothing. I figured the power was out, so I parked on the street and ran to the front door, shielding my head with my briefcase. But when I got inside, the lights were blazing. The smell of roast beef and rosemary filled the hallway. It was warm. It was cozy. Mom? Dad? I called out, shaking the water off my coat. In the dining room, honey, my mom, Linda, chirped. Her voice had that high-pitched, overly sweet tone she used when she was trying to sell something or hide something. I walked into the dining room. The table was set with the good china. The crystal wine glasses were out. And there, sitting at the head of the table like a king holding court, was my older brother, Julian. Julian was 34, 4 years older than me. He was the golden boy, the one with the charm, the smile, and the career that nobody quite understood. He called himself a consultant or a brand facilitator. To me, it just looked like he was unemployed with a better vocabulary. "Hey, little brother," Julian said, raising a glass of Cabernet. "You look like a drowned rat." "Garage door opener isn't working," I muttered, pulling out my chair. I had to park on the street. My dad, Robert, cleared his throat. He didn't look up from his plate. He was cutting his roast beef with surgical precision, focusing entirely on the meat. That was Dad's tell. When he couldn't look you in the eye, you knew you were screwed. "About that," my mom said, beaming. She clasped her hands together. "We have some wonderful news. Julian just landed a massive opportunity. A partnership with a firm in downtown Chicago." "That's great," I said, reaching for the water pitcher. "What's the firm?" "It's high-level stuff, Caleb," Julian interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. "You wouldn't understand the nuances. It's about leveraging equity in emerging markets." I saw a flash of gold on his wrist. I froze. Julian was wearing a watch. Not just any watch. It was a Rolex Submariner. The gold and steel glinted under the chandelier light. It was huge, ostentatious, and brand new. "Nice watch," I said, my stomach tightening. "Did the firm give you a signing bonus?" Julian laughed. "You have to dress for the job you want, Caleb. Perception is reality. This bad boy, this is a tool. It tells clients I'm a winner before I even open my mouth. It's beautiful, isn't it?" Mom sighed, looking at Julian with pure adoration. "It just suits him so well." "How much was it?" I asked. "Does it matter?" Dad snapped. He finally looked up, his face flushed. "It's an investment in your brother's future." "Okay," I said, looking between them. "So, why is the garage door opener not working?" Silence descended on the table. The only sound was the clinking of Julian's fork against the china. "Well," Mom started, taking a sip of wine, "we needed to liquidate some assets to help Julian secure this position. He needed the watch and he needed some capital for the buy-in." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Liquidate assets? What assets?" "The Mustang," Dad said. He said it quickly, like ripping off a Band-Aid. I stopped breathing. "What did you say?" "We sold the Mustang," Dad repeated, louder this time, trying to sound authoritative. "This afternoon." The buyer came and picked it up around 4. I stood up so fast my chair fell backward and crashed onto the hardwood floor. You sold my car? My voice wasn't a scream. It was a low, dangerous tremble. You sold Grandpa's Mustang? It was a 1967 Ford Mustang. It wasn't in perfect condition. The paint was faded, and the transmission was sticky, but it was mine. Grandpa had left it to me specifically in his will. Not to Dad. To me. It was the only thing I owned that had any value, the only thing that made me feel like I had an identity outside of the suffocating house. It wasn't technically yours, Caleb, Mom said, her voice turning sharp. The title was in your father's name for insurance purposes. You know that. But it was left to me, I shouted. Grandpa gave it to me. I spent 3 summers restoring that engine. I bought the parts with my own money. And you lived under our roof for free while you did it. Mom slammed her hand on the table. Don't you dare raise your voice at me. You sold my car. To buy him a watch? I pointed a shaking finger at Julian. Julian looked at his wrist, admiring the Rolex. It's not just a watch, Caleb. It's a submariner. And honestly, that car was a money pit. You were never going to get it running right. We did you a favor. A favor? I felt like I was going to throw up. How am I supposed to get to work? How am I supposed to get to the office? There's a bus stop 3 blocks away, Dad said, retreating into his roast beef. Or you can walk. It's only 5 miles. Good exercise. You spend too much time sitting at a desk anyway. Walk. I stared at them. It is pouring rain. It's November. You want me to walk to work so Julian can wear a Rolex? Stop being so selfish, Mom cried out, tears instantly springing to her eyes. It was her best trick. Weaponized victimhood. Your brother is on the brink of success. He needs our support. Why can't you ever just be happy for him? Why do you always have to make everything about you? Selfish. I laughed. A harsh, dry sound. I pay rent here. I buy my own groceries. Julian hasn't paid a dime in 6 years. I am building a network, Julian shouted, standing up to match my height. I am building an empire. You're punching numbers in a spreadsheet for a salary that I'll make in a week once this deal goes through. You're small time, Caleb. You've always been small time. I looked at my father. Dad, please, tell me you didn't do this. Dad took a long drink of wine. The deal is done, Caleb. The car is gone. We got $12,000 for it. The watch was 10. The rest is going to Julian's expenses. You sold Grandpa's legacy for 12 grand, I whispered. It was just an old car, Dad muttered. I looked around the room. The warmth, the roast beef, the crystal glasses. It all felt fake. It felt like a stage set for a play I didn't want to be in anymore. I looked at Julian, smug and shining. I looked at my parents, convinced of their own righteousness. Give me my keys, I said. What? Mom blinked. The house keys. I'm leaving. Oh, stop being dramatic, Mom scoffed. Sit down and eat your dinner. We made roast beef. I am not eating with you. I am not living with you. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my house key, and threw it onto the table. It landed with a heavy clatter right next to the gravy boat. I'm done. Where are you going to go? Julian sneered. You don't have a car, remember? I'll walk, I said. I turned around and walked to the front door. Caleb, Mom shouted after me. If you walk out that door, don't you expect us to come running after you? You are breaking this family apart over a stupid car. I opened the door. The wind howled, spraying rain into the hallway. It wasn't just a car, I said, not looking back. It was the only thing in this house that was real. I slammed the door shut. I stood on the porch for a second, the adrenaline vibrating in my fingertips. I didn't have a jacket hood. I didn't have an umbrella. I had a briefcase, a cheap suit, and a pair of dress shoes that were about to get ruined. I stepped off the porch and into the rain. The cold hit me like a physical blow. Within seconds, I was soaked to the bone. My hair was plastered to my skull. Water ran down the back of my neck. I started walking. I walked past the empty spot where the Mustang used to be. I walked past the neighbors' houses with their warm yellow windows. I walked toward the city. Every step was a promise. Every drop of rain was a reminder. They took my mobility. They took my inheritance. They took my dignity. They told me to walk. So I walked. But they had no idea where I was going. The first week was hell. There is no other word for it. My parents lived in a suburb that wasn't designed for pedestrians. There were no sidewalks for long stretches of the commute. I had to walk on the shoulder of the road, trucks blasting past me, spraying dirty slush and gravel onto my pants. I found a studio apartment in the worst part of town. It was the only thing I could afford without a deposit, because my loving parents had drained my emergency fund 2 years prior for a family emergency that turned out to be Julian's DUI lawyer fees. The apartment smelled like boiled cabbage and stale cigarettes. The radiator clanked all night like a dying engine. Every morning, I woke up at 5 a.m. I put on my second-hand coat. I walked 3 miles to the bus stop, took 2 transfers, and walked another mile to the office. My shoes fell apart within a month. The soles separated from the leather, flapping with every step. I used duct tape to hold them together. I colored the tape with a black Sharpie so my boss wouldn't notice. One morning, about 3 months after I left, I arrived at the office soaked. It had been sleeting. My boss, Mr. Henderson, caught me in the break room trying to dry my socks under the hand dryer. "Caleb," he said, looking at my shivering frame, "is everything all right? You've been aromatic lately, and you're always wet." I turned off the hand dryer. I could have made up an excuse. I could have said my car broke down. But I was done lying for my family. "My parents sold my car without my permission, sir," I said, my voice steady, "to buy my brother a luxury watch. I'm walking and taking the bus until I can afford a new vehicle." Mr. Henderson raised an eyebrow. He was a hard man, a numbers guy, but he respected grit. "That's a hell of a commute." "It gives me time to think," I said. "Well," he grunted, "think faster, and bring a spare pair of socks. We have a client meeting at 10. I didn't buy a car. I saved every penny. I ate instant ramen for dinner every single night. I drank the free coffee at the office instead of buying breakfast. I became obsessed with my bank account. I watched the numbers grow, slowly, painfully. Meanwhile, I watched Julian's life unfold on Instagram. He didn't block me. He wanted me to see. There was a photo of him at a steakhouse, the Rolex front and center. Caption: "Closing deals. The grind never stops. #hustle, #Rolex life." There was a video of him leaning against a Porsche. I knew for a fact it was a rental because I saw the rental agency keychain dangling from the ignition in the reflection of his sunglasses. Caption: "New wheels? Maybe. Big things coming. #Porsche, #blessed." My mom commented on every single post. "So proud of you, honey. You deserve it all." It made my blood boil. But it also focused me. Anger is a potent fuel if you know how to burn it. The turning point came 6 months in. I was working late, as usual, trying to get some overtime pay. The office was empty except for Sarah, the senior portfolio manager. Sarah was a legend in the firm. She was in her 50s, sharp as a tack, and terrifying. She dealt with distressed debt. I was printing a report when I heard her on the phone. The door to her office was open. "I don't care about the sob story, Mark," she was saying, her voice cutting through the air. "Look at the LTV. The loan-to-value ratio is upside down. The bank wants to offload this paper. If we buy the mortgage note at 60 cents on the dollar, we own the debt. We control the asset. If they pay, we make 12% interest. If they don't, we foreclose and take the house for half its value. It's simple math." I stood by the printer, mesmerized. Buying the debt, controlling the asset. I waited until she hung up, then knocked on her door. "Sarah?" She looked up over her reading glasses. "You're still here, Walker? Go home." "I have a question," I said, stepping inside. "About what you just said. Buying mortgage notes." She leaned back. "What about it? You said you can buy a mortgage from a bank for less than what the borrower owes?" "It's called non-performing notes," Sarah explained, seeing the genuine hunger in my eyes. When a borrower stops paying, the bank starts losing money. They have to hold capital reserves against that bad debt. It hurts their balance sheet. They'd rather sell the debt to a private investor for cash now, even if it's less than the total, just to get it off their books. So, I said, my brain firing on all cylinders. If I buy the note, I become the bank? Essentially, she nodded. You become the secured creditor. You can restructure the loan, you can forgive part of it, or you can take the collateral. The house. How much capital do you need to start? She laughed. For commercial stuff? Millions. For residential? Depending on the market, maybe 20-30 grand for a second lien. More for a first position. Why? You planning a takeover? I'm planning a future, I said. That night I didn't sleep. I researched distressed mortgage investing. I read forums. I read legal codes. I learned about junior liens, judicial foreclosure, and promissory notes. I realized something profound. Wealth wasn't about flashy watches or rented cars. It was about owning the paper. It was about being on the receiving end of the interest payments. I worked harder. I stopped just doing data entry and started building algorithms to help Sarah identify the best debt portfolios to buy. I automated half her workload. 3 months later, Sarah called me into her office. You've made me a lot of money this quarter, Caleb, she said. The partners noticed. She slid an envelope across the desk. It was a bonus check, $15,000, plus a promotion to junior associate. Get yourself a car, she said. I looked at the check. I thought about the Mustang. I thought about the rain. No, I said, tucking the check into my pocket. I'm going to invest this. Smart kid, she smirked. I kept walking. I kept taping my shoes. But now I had a war chest. A year passed. I had saved $40,000. I started buying small slices of debt, credit card debt, small personal loans, pennies on the dollar, collecting what I could. I was ruthless. I learned the law. I learned how to apply pressure. And then I started watching my parents. It wasn't hard. My mom had a public Facebook profile. She posted everything. Vacation to Cabo. Julian treated us. #family first. New living room set. Julian says we need to modernize. They were spending money they didn't have. I knew my dad's salary. He was a mid-level manager at a hardware supply company. He made decent money, but not Cabo and new furniture money. Not with a mortgage. And Julian? Julian was a black hole. I ran a background check on him. Cost me $40 online. The results were pathetic. He had 3 maxed-out credit cards, a lien from the IRS for unpaid taxes from 2 years ago, and a civil judgment from a landlord in the city for trashed property. The partnership in Chicago? It never existed. He was involved in a multi-level marketing scheme selling high-frequency trading courses. Pyramid scheme. He was broke, and he was dragging my parents down with him. One Saturday, I went to a coffee shop near my old neighborhood. I sat in the back, wearing a hoodie. I saw Emily, Julian's ex-wife, walk in. They had been divorced for 2 years. She hated him. I walked over. Emily? She looked up, startled. Caleb? Oh my God. You look intense. I need to ask you something, I said, sitting down. About the Rolex. She laughed. A bitter, sharp sound. That stupid watch? The one he wears everywhere. Yeah, the one my parents sold my car to buy. Her eyes widened. They sold your Mustang? That beautiful car. Yeah. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. She scrolled for a minute and then shoved the screen in my face. It was a photo of a pawn shop receipt. He sold the real one 3 months after he got it, she said. He got 8 grand for it. He blew it all on sports betting in a weekend. The one he wears now. It's a super clone. A Chinese fake. He bought it for $400 online. He thinks nobody notices, but the ticking is too loud. I stared at the phone. He sold the legacy. He sold the sacrifice. For a gamble. And now he was wearing a lie on his wrist. Can you send me that picture? I asked. With pleasure, she said. Thanks, Emily. Take him down, Caleb, she whispered as I stood up. Burn it all down. I plan to, I said. 2 weeks later, the notification popped up on my system at work. I had set up a Google alert for my parents' address and names in the public records database. New filing, notice of default. They had missed 3 mortgage payments. But there was something else. A new recording on the title. A second mortgage. 6 months ago, they had refinanced. They pulled out every dime of equity they had, probably around $100,000, and took out a high-interest loan. Where did that money go? I knew exactly where. Into Julian's pocket. To keep up the charade. To pay off his gambling debts. To fund the trips to Cabo. Now the money was gone, and the bank was calling. I walked into Sarah's office. I didn't knock. I need a favor, I said. I need to buy a specific non-performing note. It's residential. It's local. And I need to do it through a blind LLC. Sarah looked at me. She saw the look in my eye. It wasn't business. It was personal. Who's the borrower? She asked. Robert and Linda Walker, I said. She paused. She knew my last name. Your parents. My debtors, I corrected her. She smiled. A slow, shark-like smile. Sit down, Caleb, she said. Let's make a deal. The process of buying my parents' debt was surprisingly bureaucratic. It wasn't dramatic like in the movies, not yet. It was a series of emails, spreadsheets, and wire transfers. I formed an LLC called GM 67 Holdings. It stood for Grandpa's Mustang 67. Petty? Maybe. Necessary? Absolutely. The bank that held my parents' mortgage was a regional lender. They were terrified of the current market volatility. When Sarah approached them on behalf of my LLC, offering to buy a package of distressed assets in cash, they didn't even blink. We bundled my parents' loan with 3 others to mask the intent. I paid $280,000 for a mortgage that had a face value of $350,000. I used every penny of my savings, plus a hard money loan Sarah helped me secure against my future bonuses. I was all in. If this went south, I would be bankrupt. But I wasn't betting on the market. I was betting on Julian's incompetence. And that was a sure thing. Once the paperwork was signed, I officially owned the paper. I was the bank. I waited. I didn't storm the house. I didn't call them. I wanted to see what they would do. I monitored the account. The due date for the next payment came and went. Nothing. 5 days later, late fees applied. Still nothing. I accessed the notes from the previous bank servicer. There were logs of phone calls. Borrower Linda states, check is in the mail. Borrower, Robert, states, son is transferring funds. Please hold. They were stalling. I decided it was time to turn up the heat. I hired a lawyer, Mark. Mark was expensive, cold, and specialized in aggressive collections. Send them the standard notice of acceleration, I told Mark. Tell them the full balance is due immediately because of the default terms. You want to go straight for the throat? Mark asked, polishing his glasses. Usually we offer a modification first. No modifications, I said. They had their chance. A week later, I got an invitation in the mail. It wasn't a check. It was a wedding invitation. Cousin Sarah is getting married. It was a family wedding. My cousin Sarah, not my boss, was getting married at a country club upstate. I knew my parents would be there. I knew Julian would be there. I hadn't seen them in nearly 2 years. I decided to go. I rented a car for the weekend. A nice, sensible sedan. I put on my best suit, one I had actually paid to have tailored. When I walked into the reception hall, I felt the eyes on me. The black sheep had returned. I saw them at table number 2, the VIP family table. Mom was wearing a dress that was too sparkly for a daytime wedding. Dad looked tired, his skin gray. Julian was there, holding court, spinning some story to my Uncle Tom. I walked up to the table. Hello, I said. Mom dropped her fork. Caleb. Hey, Mom. Dad. Julian looked me up and down. He smirked. Well, look who decided to show up. Did you take the bus here? Or did you hitchhike? The table laughed nervously. I drove, I said calmly. Rental? Julian asked, raising an eyebrow. Something like that, I said. Nice watch, Julian. Still the Submariner. He instinctively covered his wrist, then realized what he was doing and flashed it. Always. It's a classic. Value only goes up. Unlike your career, I'm guessing. My career is fine, I said. I looked at Dad. How are things at home, Dad? Everything secure. Dad flinched. He wiped sweat from his forehead. Fine. Everything is fine. Busy. Really? Depressed. Because I heard the housing market is getting tricky. Interest rates and all. We're fine. Mom snapped. Why do you always have to be so negative? We are here to celebrate. Right? I said. Celebration. I leaned in closer to Julian. By the way, I heard about the Chicago partnership falling through. Tough break. Julian's face went rigid. It didn't fall through. We pivoted. I'm into crypto now. High yield farming. Right? I said. Crypto. I walked away and sat at the back table with the distant relatives. I watched them all night. I watched Julian order expensive scotch and charge it to the bride's father's tab. I watched Mom pretending to be the queen of the ball, while Dad checked his phone every 5 minutes with a look of panic. They were dancing on the edge of a cliff. 2 days after the wedding, Mark called me. They responded to the notice, Mark said. They're claiming financial hardship. They want a forbearance. They want to pause payments for 6 months. 6 months. I laughed. In 6 months, the equity will be gone. Deny it. They also sent a letter, Mark said, addressed to the lender. It's personal. Read it, I said. Mark cleared his throat. To whom it may concern. We are a respectable family. My husband has worked for 30 years. My son is an entrepreneur waiting on a large liquidity event. We just need time. Please understand, we are good people. Good people. Good people who sold their son's inheritance. Good people who told their son to walk in the rain. Mark, I said, initiate the foreclosure. Are you sure, Caleb? Once we file the lease pendens, it becomes public record. It's the point of no return. File it, I said. And Mark? Make sure the process server delivers the papers when Julian is there. I want him to sign for it. The foreclosure process is a legal sledgehammer. It's slow to lift, but when it comes down, it crushes everything. I spent the next month living a double life. By day, I was the diligent analyst helping Sarah make millions for the firm. By night, I was the shadow over my parents' house. I drove by the house once, late at night. The lights were on. I saw Julian's silhouette in the window of his old bedroom. He was pacing. I wondered if he knew. I wondered if Mom and Dad had told him that the bank was coming for the house, or if they were still protecting their precious golden boy from the harsh reality. I got my answer a week later. Mark forwarded me a voicemail that had been left on the LLC's service line. It was Julian. Yeah, this is Julian Walker representing the homeowners at 42 Oak Street. Look, I don't know who you guys think you are sending these threats. Do you know who I am? I have lawyers who eat guys like you for breakfast. You're harassing my elderly parents. If you don't back off, I'm going to sue you for emotional distress. We're going to countersue for predatory lending. Call me back immediately. He sounded terrified. The bluster was thin, cracking at the edges. I saved the recording. I made it my ringtone for a day, just to remind myself what fear sounded like in a bully's voice. Then the reality hit. The foreclosure auction was set. In my state, it was a non-judicial process for the final step, but because of the complexity of the title, we scheduled a final mediation meeting. It was a required formality to see if a workout was possible. This was it. The reveal. Mark set the meeting for a Friday afternoon at his office downtown. They're bringing a lawyer, Mark told me. Some strip mall guy. He's cheap, but he's loud. Let him be loud, I said. You have to be there, Caleb, Mark warned. As the representative of GM 67 Holdings, you have to sign the papers if we reject their offer. I'll be there, I said. But I want to go in last. Let them get settled. Let them sweat. On the morning of the meeting, I went to the bank. I withdrew $100 in crisp, new bills. Then I went to a toy store. I bought a small, die-cast model of a 1967 Ford Mustang. Cost me $5. I put it in my pocket. I drove to the office building. It was a glass tower, imposing and cold. I took the elevator up to the 20th floor. I could hear shouting from the conference room before I even opened the door. "This is outrage." That was Julian's voice. "You can't just take a family's home. We have rights. Squatters' rights. Something." "Mr. Walker, please lower your voice," Mark's calm baritone replied. "Your clients are 6 months behind. You refinanced 9 months ago and have made 2 payments total. The math doesn't work." "We can pay," Mom shouted. "We just need a little more time. Julian's deal is closing next week." Next week. It was always next week. I stood outside the heavy oak door. I adjusted my tie. I checked my reflection in the glass panel. I didn't see the scared kid who walked in the rain anymore. I saw a man who owned the ground they were standing on. I placed my hand on the handle. It was time to collect. I pushed the door open. The conference room was air-conditioned to a frigid temperature. A long mahogany table dominated the space. On one side sat Mark, looking bored, tapping a pen against a stack of files. On the other side sat my family. Mom looked 10 years older than when I last saw her. Her makeup was caked on, trying to hide the dark circles under her eyes. Dad was slumped in his chair, staring at his hands, defeated. And Julian was standing up, his face red, leaning over the table. He was wearing the fake Rolex. Next to him was their lawyer, a sweaty man in an ill-fitting gray suit who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Who is this?" Julian snapped as I walked in. "We're in a private meeting. Get the hell out. We're dealing with the bank." Mom looked up. "Caleb?" Her voice wavered. What are you doing here? Did you follow us? Did you come to gloat?" Julian sneered, dropping back into his chair. "Look, we're having a family crisis. Okay? We don't have time for your little pity party. Go wait in the lobby if you want a ride home." I didn't say a word. I walked past them. The sound of my dress shoes on the floor was the only noise in the room. I walked to the head of the table. I pulled out the leather executive chair. And I sat down. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Julian blinked. He looked at Mark, then at me. "Excuse me? That's the chairman's seat. You can't sit there." "Actually," Mark said, finally looking up with a small, sharp smile, "he can. Mr. and Mrs. Walker, Julian, I'd like to introduce you to the managing member of GM67 Holdings, the owner of your mortgage note." Mark gestured to me. "Caleb." The color drained from Julian's face so fast it looked like he was going to faint. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "What?" Mom whispered. I don't understand." "It's simple, Mom," I said, my voice calm, steady, and terrifyingly polite. "You stopped paying the bank. The bank wanted to sell the debt. I bought it." "You?" Dad rasped. You bought our house?" "I bought the mortgage," I corrected. "Technically, I own the debt, which means you owe me the money." "That's impossible." Julian slammed his hand on the table. "You're a data entry clerk. You make minimum wage. You walk to work. Where the hell would you get $300,000? "I worked," I said, "and I invested. And unlike you, Julian, I didn't spend my money on fake watches and rental cars." Julian instinctively covered his wrist. "It's not fake," he shouted, his voice cracking. "We have the pawn shop receipt, Julian," I said softly. "Emily sent it to me. November 2021. You sold the real one. You're wearing a $400 knockoff." Mom gasped. She turned to look at Julian. "Julian? Is that true?" "He's lying," Julian screamed. "He's jealous. He's always been jealous of me." "Let's focus on the issue at hand," I said, channeling Sarah's cold professionalism. Mr. Lawyer, what is your client's proposal? The strip mall lawyer looked at me, then at his file. He was visibly shaking. He realized he had walked into a blood feud, not a negotiation. Mr. Walker, Caleb, sir. The lawyer stammered. My clients, your parents, are proposing a payment plan. $500 a month towards the arrears, plus the regular mortgage payment, starting in 3 months. I picked up the file in front of me. I pretended to read it. Denied, I said. Caleb, Mom cried out. We are your parents. You can't deny us. We raised you. You kicked me out, I said, looking her dead in the eye. You sold my grandfather's car, my property, to fund his gambling addiction. I pointed at Julian. And then you told me to walk in the rain. Remember? Good exercise, Dad said. Dad flinched. He covered his face with his hands. That was a misunderstanding. Mom sobbed. We wanted to help your brother. We thought he would pay us back. And when he didn't? I asked. When he drained your savings. When he forced you to refinance the house. Did you call me then? Did you ask for help? Or did you keep posting photos of your perfect life while drowning in debt? We were ashamed, Dad whispered. You should be, I said. So what now? Julian challenged, trying to regain some bravado. You going to evict us? You going to throw your own mother on the street? You won't do it. You're too soft. You've always been soft. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the die-cast toy Mustang. I slid it across the mahogany table. It spun slowly and stopped right in front of Julian. What is this? Julian asked. That's the trade, I said. You sold my car for 12 grand. I bought your house for 280. I'd say I won that negotiation. I turned to Mark. Proceed with the foreclosure. I want possession of the property in 30 days. 30 days? Mom screamed. Where will we go? We have nowhere to go. I hear Julian has a great network in Chicago, I said dryly. Maybe you can crash at his penthouse. Caleb, please, Dad begged. He looked broken. Please, we're old. We made a mistake. Don't destroy us for a mistake. I looked at them, really looked at them. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel joy. I felt a heavy, cold satisfaction, like dropping a heavy stone you've been carrying for miles. This isn't vengeance, Dad, I said. This is business. You taught me that. Perception is reality. Right, Julian? The reality is you're bankrupt. And I'm the bank. I stood up. You have 30 days to vacate. If you're not out, the sheriff will remove you. And Julian? He looked up, tears streaming down his face. The arrogance finally washed away. Leave the fake Rolex on the counter when you leave. I want to smash it with a hammer. I walked out of the room. I didn't look back. I heard Mom wailing behind me. I heard Julian cursing. I walked to the elevator. I pressed the button. When the doors opened, I stepped inside. I leaned my head back against the cool metal wall and exhaled. I had walked through the rain to get here. And now, finally, I was dry. This was the moment that changed everything, when I finally took back control of my life. Thank you for staying with me this far. You guys are amazing. Please hit the like button and comment 1 below so I know you're riding with me. It helps more people find this story, and it tells me that my journey means something to you. Your support is the fuel that keeps me going. The 30 days following that meeting were the longest of my life. Technically, they were still in the house. Legally, I owned it, but the eviction clock was ticking. My phone blew up. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in a decade were calling me. Aunt Marge called me a monster. Cousin Sarah, the bride, sent me a text saying I ruined her wedding memories because Mom cried the whole reception, which wasn't true, but narrative is everything. They tried everything. Mom showed up at my apartment. I didn't answer the buzzer. She stood outside screaming that she was going to call the police, claiming I had stolen the deed. I let her scream. The neighbors called the cops on her. Seeing my mother being escorted away by a patrol officer wasn't a highlight, but it was necessary. Julian tried a different tactic. He tried to act like we were partners. He sent me an email. Subject: Proposal for Asset Management. Body: Caleb, look. Crazy meeting. Respect the hustle. Seriously. But let's be real. You don't want to live in that house. It's old. Why don't we flip it? I know a contractor. We can split the profit 60/40ths. You take the 60. Let's keep this in the family. I didn't reply. I just forwarded the email to Mark to add to the foreclosure file as evidence of their acknowledgement of the debt. Day 29 arrived. I drove to the house. I brought Mark, and I brought 2 off-duty police officers I had hired as private security. I wasn't taking chances. There was a moving truck in the driveway. A cheap rental truck. I parked across the street, in the spot where I used to park the Mustang. I watched them. Julian was carrying boxes. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing sweatpants. He looked smaller, deflated. Dad was carrying a lamp. He looked frail. Mom was sitting on the front steps, just staring at the lawn. I got out of the car. Need a hand? I asked. They all froze. You're early? Julian spat, wiping sweat from his forehead. We have until midnight. I'm just here for the final inspection, I said, making sure you aren't stripping the copper wire out of the walls. We aren't criminals, Dad said softly. You sold a car that didn't belong to you, I reminded him. That's theft. So, excuse me if I verify the inventory. I walked past them into the house. It was strange. The house looked exactly the same, but it felt completely different. The smell of roast beef was gone, replaced by the smell of dust and cardboard. The outline of pictures removed from the walls left ghost squares on the paint. I walked into the dining room. The table, the scene of the crime, was still there. They weren't taking it. It was too heavy. I walked into the kitchen. On the granite countertop, sitting on a paper towel, was the Rolex. I picked it up. Felt light. Cheap. The gold plating was already wearing off on the clasp. I told you I'd leave it, Julian said from the doorway. He was holding a box of his awards, participation trophies from high school football. So you did, I said. Are you happy? Julian asked. You won. You crushed us. Are you happy? Happiness isn't the goal, Julian, I said, tossing the fake watch in the trash can. It made a hollow clunk. Justice is. Where are we supposed to go? He asked. Mom and Dad. They don't have enough for a deposit on an apartment. Their credit is shot because of the foreclosure. I thought you were the golden boy, I said. I thought you were the provider. I'm broke, Caleb, he screamed, finally admitting it. I have nothing. I owe bookies. I owe the IRS. I have nothing. Then maybe you should get a job, I said. I hear the warehouse is hiring. It's hard work. You'll be on your feet all day. But hey, it's good exercise. He stared at me with pure hatred, but he didn't move. He couldn't. I held all the cards. I walked back outside. Mom was still on the steps. Caleb, she said, not looking up. I'm sorry. I stopped. Are you sorry you did it? I asked. Or are you sorry I got rich enough to make you pay for it? She didn't answer. That was answer enough. I have a proposition, I said. They all looked at me. Hope flared in Dad's eyes. You need a place to live, I said. I have an empty house. This one. You're letting us stay? Mom gasped, standing up. Not for free, I said. Never for free. I pulled a document out of my jacket. This is a standard residential lease agreement. Fixed term. 6 months. The rent is $2,000 a month. That's market rate. We can't afford that, Dad said. Julian can work, I said. Mom, you can get a part-time job. Dad, you have your salary. You can afford it if you cut the Cabo trips and the wine. And after 6 months? Julian asked. After 6 months, I'm selling the house, I said. And you leave. This buys you time to fix your credit and find a small apartment. Keeps you off the street. That is my final offer. Why? Dad asked. Why help us at all? Because unlike you, I said, I don't leave family walking in the rain. They signed the lease on the hood of the moving truck. Dad's hand shook. Julian wouldn't look at me. I took the first month's rent in cash, which I knew was the last of Dad's paycheck. I watched them carry their boxes back into the house they used to own, now tenants in their own kingdom. I got in my car. I drove away. As I turned the corner, I saw a bus stop. There was a guy standing there, huddled against the wind, looking miserable. I almost stopped. Almost. But I kept driving. I had a meeting with Sarah. We had another mortgage to buy. The first month of my parents' tenancy was a study in grim reality. I didn't set up an auto draft for the rent. I wanted it physical. I wanted the transaction to be tangible. On the first of the month, at 9 a.m. sharp, I pulled into the driveway. I didn't park in the street anymore. I parked right in the center of the driveway, the nose of my car pointing at the garage door that still didn't open because they hadn't fixed the motor in 3 years. I walked to the front door and knocked. Dad answered. He looked thinner. His polo shirt was wrinkled, and he hadn't shaved in a few days. The air behind him smelled stale, lacking the aroma of expensive roasts or fresh flowers that used to define the house. "Caleb," he said, his voice flat. "Rent is due, Dad," I said, standing on the doormat. I didn't step inside. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a white envelope. It was thick. "It's all there," he said. 2,000. Cash. I took the envelope. I opened it right there on the porch. I counted it. $20 bills, 50s, a few hundreds. It smelled like desperation. I knew where this money came from. It was the liquidation of their lives. Mom had sold her china set on Facebook Marketplace. Dad had sold his golf clubs. "Receipt?" Dad asked, a bitter edge to his voice. "I'll email it to you," I said, tucking the envelope into my jacket. "How's the job hunt for Julian going?" Dad looked away, staring at the azalea bushes that were starting to die from lack of water. "He's looking. It's a tough market for executives." "He's not an executive, Dad," I said. "He's an entry-level applicant with a criminal record for unpaid civil judgments. Tell him the warehouse down on 5th is hiring night shift loaders. $17 an hour. He has back problems," Dad mumbled. "He seemed to lift those golf clubs fine when he was playing on your dime," I replied. "See you on the 1st. I walked away. I didn't feel glee. I felt a cold, clinical efficiency. This was a contract. Nothing more. But the house of cards was still collapsing from the inside. 2 weeks later, I got a call from the local police station. It wasn't about the house. It was about Julian. He had been caught shoplifting. Not food. Not medicine. He had tried to walk out of an electronics store with a high-end noise-canceling headset. Because I was listed as the property owner where he resided, and because Mom and Dad didn't answer their phones, their service had been cut off for non-payment. The cops called me. I went down to the station. I saw Julian sitting on a metal bench, handcuffed to the rail. He looked pathetic. The swagger was gone. The fake Rolex was gone. He was wearing a stained hoodie and jeans that were too loose. "Caleb," he pleaded when he saw me, "you gotta bail me out. Mom and Dad don't have the cash. Just put it on a credit card. I'll pay you back." I looked at the desk sergeant. "What's the bail?" $500, the sergeant said. I looked at Julian. $500. The cost of a nice dinner he used to brag about. "No," I said. Julian's eyes widened. "What? You have the money. I know you have it." "I do," I said. "But that's rent money. If I spend it on your bail, Mom and Dad will be short on the 1st. And if they're short, I evict them. So it's a choice, Julian. Your freedom or their roof." He stared at me, his mouth agape. "You're a psychopath." "I'm an investor," I said. "And you're a bad liability." I left him there. He spent 3 nights in county lockup before a public defender got him released on his own recognizance. When he got home, the dynamic in the house shifted permanently. Mom and Dad finally saw him. Not the golden boy waiting for his big break, but a 34-year-old thief who would let them sleep on the street to save his own skin. While their world was shrinking, mine was expanding. With the cash flow from the rent and my bonuses at work, I finally made the purchase I had been dreaming of since I was 16. I found it in a barn in rural Ohio. A 1969 Ford Mustang Fastback. It was a shell. No engine, rusted floorboards, interior ripped to shreds. It was a disaster to anyone else. To me, it was a blank canvas. I bought it for $8,000. I had it towed to a rental garage I secured near my apartment. This became my sanctuary. Every night after work, instead of going home to a lonely apartment, I went to the garage. I stripped the car down to the bare metal. I learned to weld. I learned to sandblast. My hands, which had been clean and soft from typing on keyboards, became permanently stained with grease and oil. My knuckles were always scraped. My back ached. And I loved it. It was during this time that I met Sophia. She wasn't in finance. She wasn't in real estate. She was a pediatric nurse who worked odd shifts. We met at a 24-hour diner where I would go for coffee after late nights at the garage. She saw me sitting there, reading a manual on V8 engine rebuilding, my hands covered in grime. "You look like you're trying to build a time machine," she had said, pouring her own coffee at the counter next to me. "Just a car," I smiled. "But maybe a little bit of time travel, too." Sophia was the opposite of my family. She was grounded. She saw trauma in children every day at the hospital, so she had zero tolerance for manufactured drama. When I told her about the foreclosure, about the rent arrangement, she didn't call me a hero, and she didn't call me a monster. She took a sip of her coffee, looked me in the eye and said, "Boundaries are expensive, Caleb, but you get what you pay for." She became my anchor. She would come to the garage and sit on a folding chair, reading her medical textbooks while I wrenched on the suspension. She handed me tools. She wiped grease off my forehead. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the provider or the disappointment. I was just Caleb. The 4th month of the lease brought a revelation that severed the last thread of guilt I was holding on to. My Uncle Tom called me. Tom was Dad's younger brother. He was the black sheep of the previous generation because he refused to go to college and became a master plumber instead. He was the only one who had shaken my hand at the wedding. "Kid, buy me a beer," he said over the phone. We met at a dive bar. Tom looked serious. He ordered a pitcher and poured 2 glasses. "You're doing good, Caleb," he said. "I drove by the old house. Grass is getting long." "Not my problem until they move out," I said. "Lease says tenant maintains the landscaping." Tom chuckled. "Ruthless. I like it. But listen, I need to tell you something, before you feel too bad about making them pay rent." "I don't feel bad," I lied. I still felt twinges. They were my parents, after all. "Good," Tom said, "because you shouldn't." About 2 weeks after you served them the foreclosure notice, before the final meeting, your mother called me. He took a long drink. She wanted to know if I knew a lawyer who specialized in elder abuse and undue influence. I froze, the beer glass halfway to my mouth. "What?" "She was trying to build a case, Caleb," Tom said, his voice dropping low. "She was telling people you manipulated them, that you tricked your father into signing over the deed, that you used your finance knowledge to defraud them. She wanted to sue you for the deed back, claiming mental incompetence on Robert's part." My stomach turned over. She accused me of fraud? "She tried," Tom nodded. "She called 3 lawyers. I know because one of them is my buddy from the bowling league. He told me he laughed her out of the office. He looked at the paperwork you filed. He told her, 'Lady, your son owns this fair and square. You're lucky he hasn't sued you for the damages to the property value.'" I set the glass down. My hand was shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so cold it felt like ice in my veins. They hadn't just made a mistake. They hadn't just been desperate. They had actively tried to destroy my reputation and send me to prison for fraud, just to keep the house they lost. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "I wanted to see if they'd go through with it," Tom said. "And I wanted to see if you'd cave. You didn't. You held the line. I'm proud of you, kid." "Thanks, Tom." "One more thing," Tom said, reaching into his pocket. "Your dad. He didn't want to do it. Linda pushed him. But he didn't stop her either. Remember that. I drove to the garage that night. I didn't work on the car. I just sat in the driver's seat of the stripped-down chassis, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Any lingering thought of letting them stay longer or giving them a discount on the final month evaporated. The final month arrived. The house was falling apart. I drove by and saw a window broken on the second floor, covered with cardboard. The lawn was knee-high. It looked like a foreclosure. On the 25th day of the 6th month, I received a text from Dad. We will be out by the 30th. Please come for the key exchange at noon. I brought Sophia with me. I wanted a witness. I wanted her to see the end of the chapter. We pulled up in my daily driver. The moving truck was there again, but it was smaller this time. A 15-footer. They had sold almost everything. Mom was standing by the truck. She looked frail. The arrogance was completely gone, replaced by a hollow, shell-shocked expression. She held a small box of kitchen items. Dad was locking the front door. I walked up the driveway, Sophia's hand in mine. We're done, Dad said, handing me the keys. His hand touched mine and he flinched. Everything is out. We swept the floors. Where's Julian? I asked. He left yesterday, Dad said, his voice cracking. He found a friend in another state to crash with. He didn't help us pack. Of course he didn't. The host organism had withered, so the parasite moved on. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, though I wasn't. Dad looked at me. He looked at the house. Then he looked at Sophia. You have a nice girl, he said. I do, I said. Caleb, Dad started, taking a breath. I know we messed up. The car. The lawsuit idea. Tom told me he talked to you. He knew. We were scared, Dad said, tears welling in his eyes. We were losing everything. People do crazy things when they're drowning. People ask for help when they're drowning, Dad, I said. They don't try to drown the person throwing them a rope. He nodded. He knew I was right. I hope one day you can forgive us. I looked at the house. I looked at the spot where the Mustang used to be. I looked at my hands, strong and scarred from building my own car. I forgive you for the car, I said. But I don't trust you. And I can't have people I don't trust in my life. Dad lowered his head. He turned and walked to the truck. Mom didn't even look at me. She climbed into the passenger seat, staring straight ahead. They drove away. I watched the truck disappear around the corner. Are you okay? Sophia asked, squeezing my hand. Yeah, I said, taking a deep breath of the summer air. I think I am. We walked into the house. It was empty. It echoed. The ghosts were gone. I pulled out my phone and called my real estate agent. List it, I said. As is. Get it sold. The house sold in 3 days. The market was hot, and despite the neglect, the bones of the house were good. A young couple bought it. They were expecting their first child. They were excited. I met them at the closing. They talked about painting the nursery yellow and planting a vegetable garden in the backyard. I signed the deed over to them with a smile. It wasn't my burden anymore. It was their beginning. With the proceeds from the sale, I paid off the hard money loan I had used to buy the mortgage. I paid Sarah her commission, and when the dust settled, I had profited nearly $80,000. I didn't buy a watch. I didn't go to Cabo. I finished the Mustang. Took another 6 months. I painted it midnight blue, a dark, deep color that looked black until the sun hit it. I rebuilt the 390 V8 engine with my own hands. I stitched the leather seats myself. The day I fired it up for the first time, the roar of the engine shook the walls of the garage. It was a primal, guttural sound. It was the sound of resurrection. Sophia was there, holding a bottle of cheap champagne. She smashed it on the bumper, gently. To the getaway car, she toasted. To the driver, I corrected, kissing her. Life moved on. I got promoted to senior associate. Sophia and I moved into a house, a modest one with a big garage that we bought together with both our names on the title. We split the mortgage 50/50ths. I didn't hear from my parents for a long time. I heard through Uncle Tom that they were living in a small one-bedroom apartment in a neighboring town. Dad was working part-time at a hardware store to make ends meet. Mom was volunteering at a church, finally forced to find humility. As for Julian, the silence was absolute. Until one random Tuesday 2 years later. I was stopped at a red light in the city, the Mustang idling with that deep, rhythmic thrum that vibrates in your chest. The window was down, my arm resting on the door. A delivery van pulled up next to me. It was a junk removal service. I looked over. The driver looked tired, wearing a neon yellow vest and a hat pulled low. He turned and looked at my car. His eyes widened. It was Julian. He looked rough, older. His hairline was receding. He stared at the Mustang, the embodiment of the car he had sold for pennies, and then he looked at me. Our eyes locked. He didn't sneer. He didn't shout. He didn't flip me off. He just looked tired. He looked like a man who had finally realized that the world doesn't owe you a living. The light turned green. I didn't rev the engine. I didn't peel out to show off. I just eased the car into gear and drove away. I watched him in the rearview mirror for a second, a small yellow speck in the distance, and then I turned the corner and he was gone. I drove out of the city, onto the coastal highway. The ocean was to my left, vast and open. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. I thought about the walk in the rain 3 years ago. I thought about the duct tape on my shoes. I thought about the anger that had fueled me for so long. It was gone. The anger had served its purpose. It was the rocket fuel that got me out of the atmosphere, but you can't live on rocket fuel. Now I was just gliding. I looked at the passenger seat. Sophia was asleep, her head resting against the window. I gripped the steering wheel of Grandpa's legacy, no, my legacy. They had told me to walk, so I learned to build my own engine. And now, nobody determined my direction but me. I shifted into fourth gear, pressed the gas, and drove into the horizon. That's the end of the story, but the real lesson isn't about revenge or real estate. It's about value versus cost. My family knew the cost of everything, the price of a Rolex, the price of a dinner, the price of a car, but they understood the value of nothing. They didn't value loyalty, they didn't value hard work, and they certainly didn't value me. When you let people treat you like an option, you lower your own stock price. The moment I walked out that door, I stopped accepting their valuation of me and started building my own equity. You can't change people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You can't save people who are determined to drown. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for them and for yourself is to let them face the consequences of their own actions. It's not cruelty, it's gravity. I want to hear from you guys. Have you ever had to cut off a toxic family member to save your own future? Or have you ever been the black sheep who ended up doing better than the golden child? Drop a comment below with the word good if you think I made the right choice, or share your own story of claiming your independence. I read every single comment, and your stories inspire me. Thanks for watching, and remember, you are the driver of your own life. Don't let anyone else hold the keys.